So who else has a question? If we can get the mic to, you're good, Gilbert, on that? Yeah. Okay. So let's go here, up here, and then we'll go to the back.
Thank you. John, let's say, does this affect the financing when all of a sudden you don't have as much skin in the game, as they say, or you're not, does this change your...
With some banks, it very well might. Typically, what my experience has been is once the bank gives you the approval, about 80% of the banks, they don't end up looking at the closing statement prior to close. They look at that stuff afterwards. However, when you have a bank that's sensitive to you, the borrower, or to your entity, or maybe just lending in general, they're probably going to be more sensitive to that, and they're going to say, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to put some of this stuff in reserve. Rather than take it as a credit, we're going to put some of this money in reserve. You're still going to have to pay it, or a portion of it, but we're going to put it in reserve. You'll hear them say, and by the way, we're going to open up a reserve account at our bank because they want the depository relationship, right? So sometimes you'll see that. So that could be the case. I will also get the question as to, well, why can't you do this on residential? Well, typically, if you're getting, or somebody is getting a loan on residential, a lot of times they're limited to what we call seller contribution. I know the Americans, if they're getting an FHA loan, they're limited to 3.5% of the sales price with respect to contribution. So it's not a normal thing to see these credits on the residential side of the world. 5 units and over, it's much more prevalent. Okay? Yes?
Just a quick question.
Right here.
When you're going for an inspection, what if the seller rejects your inspector? Says, I don't believe that. I don't think that those things are wrong. Should you negotiate with the guy and say, let's get a third-party inspector in here?
No, I think immediately you go to fighting.
I see.
You know what I mean? And no, I think if you've got somebody that says, well, I don't believe your inspector. Your inspector, he's like, my dad's an inspector, man. I'm going to, anyway. Your inspector should be licensed, have a good reputation, that type of thing. If you got a seller that's saying, I don't believe anything that your inspector said, you're probably going to have more issues with that deal than just that. So that's something to keep in mind. You can always walk away. I mean, you might have spent some money on the inspection, but you can always walk away and say, well, fine. If you're not going to take my due diligence studies, then we're probably going to have other issues, so I'd rather move on, kind of thing. Always negotiate. Always use that to negotiate. And eventually you may hit a wall where you can't do that anymore, and you'll just have to move on. Okay? Yep, Scott?
You talk a lot about the seller being motivated by price. In all those scenarios, the price is going down, is it not?
The price is staying the same. The net proceeds are going down.
Okay.
Because
So,
when
but the
you put a debit on the seller side, think of a debit card.
Yep.
When you use a debit card, money's going out of your account, right? When you're using a credit card, you're getting credit, right? So, yes, his proceeds or her proceeds is going down, okay? Now, you may want to spin that another way. You know what way I would spin it if they brought that particular thing up? Anybody? I would say, well, listen, your proceeds are going down, therefore you're not going to have as high a gain, you're not going to pay as much taxes. And then just smile. And then you could say something, I'm looking out for you. Here's the other thing I think you should think about. When you get the property under contract, this is a working dynamic. It doesn't stop. It's a working dynamic. Your negotiating keeps going until you close. You negotiate till you close. And once you close, then negotiating is done. But up until that point, you use every single thing to negotiate. I don't care so much about the price, but I do want the terms. And I want terms to either give me the ability to lower my down payment or increase my cash flow. Those two things. So once I get a property under contract, that's what I'm focused on. How do we lower the down payment? How do we increase the cash flow? Why is that, by the way? Increase return. So if I'm looking at working with somebody and I'm saying, they say, John, all I've got is $400,000 to work with. That's a lot of money, number one. But number two, great. Let's break this down. Why put all $400,000 on one property when, number one, that's kind of like getting a drink out of a fire hose, but number two, we're probably not able to get the best return that we could. See, by putting it through this scenario, let's say that we've got 150, 150, and another 50. We can put it on 3 properties. We're taking our return up pretty significantly there. And I think that's what I'm after. If somebody has a nest egg, which most of you, if not all of you, do, we have to treat that nest egg like gold. You've got to be able to put that on properties in which you're going to maximize your return. If you only get an 8% return by putting $400,000 on one property, but you get a 12% return on 150, 150, and 50, you see what that does, right? That's what I'm after. And that's what you all should be after when you're analyzing these deals. You've got to look at what you've got, the resources, you've got to look at the smartest way to put that down. Negotiating does not stop until you close on the property. It doesn't stop until you close on the property, okay? We got some questions in the back. Sorry, Yosh. Maybe rollerblades would be a better scenario there.
John, in the situation number one where you've identified 250,000 of renovations needed, the buyer won't budge, he won't come down at all in price, but you still think it's a good deal. It's worth it to you to pay the extra 250. Could you negotiate to increase the sales price by the 250 and then also get the deferred credit? So you're actually paying the seller's getting the same amount of money, but it's still reducing your down payment, or is the bank going to look at that as some kind of shady deal?
Okay, so his question is, could you reduce the sales price and also reduce your down payment on a deal? Or increase your down payment on a deal, sorry. Boy, if I got to take you all on, I will. I think what you have to do in that scenario is do the math. Every one of these deals at the end of the day has math to it. And when you're working your cash return on investment, you will know what's going to work out better for you in that case. You also have to take into consideration the situation of the seller. How negotiable is he or she? How flexible are they? And then ultimately compare that to, at the end of the day, your math. That will give you ultimately your answer. Okay?
Well, I think
well, you know, I can't tell you what the bank will do. It depends on their risk tolerance. It depends on you, the borrower. It depends on maybe your entity structure, your partnership, things like that. Okay? Tyler.
Sorry, I just want to sort of break down that deferred maintenance credit, how it actually works, because there was, I guess, originally there's supposed to be $400,000 deposit on the table.
That's right.
You negotiate it so that there's now only 150,000 and a 250 IOU. Who's the IOU to?
No,
or the
sounds
credit.
like
Sorry,
me-
the credit. Who is the credit to? The bank.
Sounds like to me, Tyler, and you help me out with this. You may have been gone for some of this. Is that what we're saying?
Believe it or not, I was here.
Were you here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just got distracted
I
by the
can't
parade
help
last
you
night.
with the mental capacity here. All right? I'm just kidding. Here's what we got. So again, I did this for Gilbert.
No, I don't need you to go through all three. I'm talking about just the third option.
Yeah.
I just need you to just kind of break down how the maintenance credit works.
Okay.
Exactly. Once
So
you
you've
take,
got
great, go
a-
with that, because the bank hasn't. You're negotiating with the seller, but the bank is financing the deal, right? So you have to get the bank's okay on that deferred maintenance credit, right?
You have $400,000 in deferred maintenance. You know that because of your inspection, right? 250. You've got 250. You've got $400,000 down payment. You've got $250,000 of deferred maintenance. You know that from your inspection, correct? You've got a
Sorry, I
report.
didn't know that was automatic. I thought that's what you're negotiating to get.
Tyler, give me a second here, bud. You got $250,000 as a deferred maintenance credit, right? You know that from your report. You get a report, You have cost to cure, it's 250,000, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, I understand that, but sorry, I didn't realize that because from that inspection that it is.
You weren't here for that, is that what you're saying?
Maybe we can keep the mic away from anybody that saw naked people last night.
Right. I understand that Tyler may have been affected as Gilbert was by the naked people. You guys thought you were coming to a real estate gig here.
Don't worry about it, dude. Keep going.
Okay, but I want you to understand that though. You've got $250,000 coming from a report from your inspector. There's 3 ways that you can handle that, and 3 ways typically that it's handled. The first way is to never bring that up to the seller. You're still responsible to pay your $400,000 in down payment. You're still responsible to fix the $250,000 of deferred maintenance. The second way is to deduct it from the sales price. This is where you get people that say, hey, I'm a savvy investor. I had an inspector come in, and they've listed $250,000 worth of items that need to be replaced or repaired. I would like you to deduct that from the sales price. You're still responsible to put down 20% of the sales price, right? Okay. The third way, and that's $350 by the way. The third way is something that happens and is very common in commercial real estate. Banks know about it, they deal with it every day. It's called the deferred maintenance credit. So when you have your HUD-1, your closing statement, on the buying side of your HUD-1, you have credits. On the selling side of your HUD-1, you've got debits. That's a basic accounting thing. Credits equal debits, right? So you're going to have the seller issue you a deferred maintenance credit. Typically, by the way, your commercial real estate agent handles that. It's a form that's put together that is sent to the title company. This credit is sent to the title company before closing. That $250 in credit gets added to your HUD-1 as a credit to you, but a debit to the buyer or to the seller. You got that? Any other questions with that?
No.
That will lower your down payment from $400 to $150. We good?
Without changing the sale price.
Without touching the sales price. Are we good, Tyler?
Yeah, thanks, man.
Okay.
I think it needs to be mentioned that it really isn't that difficult. And I just did it 4 weeks ago myself. You just simply ask, the owner was asking on the property that Charles and I purchased, he was asking the listing price, we gave it to him. And when John says it's right at close, we literally had it was 3 hours before we closed. And we asked, well, 3 hours, but the deferred maintenance came through and it was, our down payment came from the title company and just it was really, really simple.
Steve's property that we did the due diligence on in Phoenix, we went through the inspection and we found a couple $100,000 worth of items that need to be repaired or replaced. We said, either you give us the deferred maintenance credit or we're probably not going to go through on this deal. You have more leverage when you've got the property under contract than before you put the property under contract. Does that make more sense? Or make sense to you? Good. Yes? Peter. And then we'll come up to you. Sorry.
On the negotiation there, the example that was given, the putting the $250,000 back into the sales price, that routine, there's a flaw with that because that actually then ups your required down payment. So it's not $400,000 anymore, it's $450,000. So what happens is your deferred credit of $250,000 now only lowers your down payment to $200,000. So you're really no further ahead.
Did you see how Peter did the math and it just wanted to X your strategy there, man? Sorry about that. But he's right. He said if you increase the sales price, you're potentially increasing your down payment there. So I don't want to kind of go into that in detail. I just want to have you think about that, okay? Let's come up here a little bit. Wait for the mic. Yosh?
So what about the due diligence period then? Have we not set one, or we can continue that right till closing?
Yeah, good question. So in your sales contract, you're going to have a due diligence period set out, 30 days, 45 days, something like that. And you're going to have your inspector make his or her inspection in that time frame. So if it's 15 days into it and you're getting the report the third week or by the 21st day, you've got a good 9 days or so to negotiate with the seller on what you're going to do. Frankly, if they don't give you that credit, you can always walk away from the deal, okay? It's not something that you're forcing them to do. But what I was kind of mentioning earlier, you have more leverage because you have the property under contract, right? That's the biggest difference here. Could you negotiate those type of terms prior to getting the property under contract? Probably not. Number one, you don't have the power, you don't have the motivation by the seller, so it makes much more sense to keep that negotiating open until closing. Go ahead.
But you said we could negotiate right till closing.
You can right till closing.
So even though the due diligence is over?
Oh, I see your question. Yeah, if your due diligence period is over and, they said no, then you make the decision, either walk away or not. If you've got contingencies in there that last till closing, like for instance, buyer has the right to go and inspect the property 24 hours prior to closing, something like that would give you that option to negotiate right to close. Okay? Chris. You guys are full of questions today. Is he full of it? Really?
No, these are good questions, I think.
Of course you think that, Chris.
Especially mine.
So far.
Okay, I'm just wondering from a strategic standpoint, when you would sort of bring this type of deferred maintenance thing during that due diligence period to the seller. Like, would you want to have them have a counter offer period of time, or would you want to sort of bring this like last day kind of, a little bit extra pressure kind of scenario? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, here's the thing. I think, again, so his question is, when do you actually bring this to the seller? And I think what you would do is make that decision based on the seller's motivation, your personal situation, your time frame, the money that you have to put down, kind of thing. What I've done, and typically what I would do is, as soon as I get that report, I'm going to have something written up, either by myself or the broker that I'm using, and I want to present that to the seller. I want to make sure that I've got time there. Now, it may be counterintuitive. You might think, well, if I go to him at the 11th hour and try to do that, maybe there's more pressure on him. But I always want to kind of give that seller the respect that they don't feel pressured kind of thing, because I'm more apt to get it. In my mind, that's how it's worked, okay? Let's go here a second.
I got 4 questions.
Imagine that.
So, first one is like, you present the cost to cure at $250,000. The seller is a rehabber. Decides, well, it's not worth $250,000, it's worth $100,000.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
Okay, I think you've got to keep that line of communication open. You're negotiating.
Right.
So you're saying 250, he's saying 100.
Right.
You might meet in the middle at 175 or somewhere around there.
Correct, okay.
Okay.
Now, let's say the cost to cure happens, he takes the credit at 250, you find out you're doing this work, and you find out that the 250 was actually 350 because of a foundation issue that was deeper than you thought. Now,
Okay.
if he's doing it, you can say, well, you better fix it to the root.
I like how when we ask questions, we start making up stuff. Like, yeah, and we found a dead pony in the basement, and we don't know how to handle that. So, okay, go on with your make-believe story here.
Well,
so
it's
it's 350, not 250.
It becomes 350. Can you go back to the seller and say, hey, the issues were...
I probably think that you probably wouldn't be able to go back, because you're relying on your due diligence and your team, and that's a mistake you made, so you've got to kind of suck that up.
Perfect. So then let's say the other way. Let's say I got my $250,000. I decide I'm not going to do the work. It's
You're the
97.
buyer.
Well, it's 97% occupied. It's cash flowing, and I got $250,000 in my pocket. And I say, well, that I put it in today, or I put it in 3 years, or I put it into another building, and take the cash flow from there and repair this building.
Yeah.
I mean, am I forced to have to do that work?
Raphael, yeah, see, here in the States, you're forced to do that work. No.
Maybe in
You're
Chicago.
You're an entrepreneur, Raphael. You're going to make that decision on whether to do that work or not. If you plan on not doing that work, you're not going to tell the seller that. You see what I'm saying?
Right, okay.
You're going to make this thing to the seller like a big deal.
Right.
Like, hey, we're going to get this squared away. We're going to take it as a credit because I need to, keep that money so I can fix it the day of closing or just shortly after.
Okay.
That's the message you're going to give to the seller. If you plan on not doing that because it's 97% occupied and all of that stuff, that's your decision as an entrepreneur. I would suggest that any issue with respect to condition that affects the health and safety of the tenants or the structure of the building, you get fixed on more of an urgent basis. Okay?
Well, I guess there's no fourth question.
Okay. Are you fully satisfied with those? John, what if there's a robin that flies over the building and it, okay. Anybody else? We good? Oh, Scott has one. Gilbert has one. Sam has one. Holy cow.
Tax implication.
Sam, if you're going to ask a question, you got to turn the mic. Let me see that. This is the mic. Sam was talking into this. Obviously, these naked bike riders last night affected you more than...
Yoshi knows how to use the mic better. That's how he gave it to
Got
me.
it.
So.
Got it. Go ahead.
Tax implications of option 3, if you do the work, that will be treated as shorter depreciation value versus if it's up on the against the purchase price, then it's depreciated over 27 and a half years, something like that.
Well,
which one is
if you're adding capital expenditures and you're adding, things like appliances or air conditioning units, those are depreciated on a shorter schedule, okay? So you might use a 7-year schedule as opposed to a 27-and-a-half-year schedule, okay? Did that answer that?
Yep.
All right. Scott.
Just one quick thing. I guess this is more of a, finding these properties. Is it advisable to look for places that would likely need maintenance to?
I like, when I'm looking at stuff, I want to find a stabilized as property as I can find. I like to also find the worst house on the best block.
Right.
I don't want the best house on the worst block. I want the worst house on the best block.
Okay.
So sometimes that will have issues maintenance-wise to come across. Here's a rule of thumb. For a Class B property, you're going to have about $2,000 worth of deferred maintenance on average for that. So if you're buying a 12-unit building, that's going to be about $24,000 of deferred maintenance. Okay? I don't necessarily like the renovations, rehabbing on multifamily units because you just open up such a can of worms. Single-family houses, that's fine, but on the multifamily side, I would like to find more of a stabilized property if I could. I'd like to go in and just affect the NOI. Because when you can change the NOI to increase value, that's a different story than opening up walls and all that stuff.
Capital expenditures. Yeah.
Yep.
One last thing. Can you just review again of this increased price one?
I'm not really sure what the details of that. Let's save that for another time if we could, because
Sure.
I'm trying to keep us on track here a little bit. We're all good? Did I get everybody caught up? Gilbert. Let's go to Gilbert, and then I got to get back on track here.
Well, it's real quick, but your deferred maintenance, how do you come up with that figure if it's only based on 30%?
30%.
Well, you were saying that like only 30% of the units are being inspected.
Okay, so good question. So I've got 60 units, and we're inspecting 30% randomly. So that would be how many units? 18, right? Gilbert, when I ask you a question, I need you to respond back. 18, right? So the inspector's going to go through and write up those 18. He's going to inspect the outside, but he's probably going to do a little bit of extrapolation, okay? And say, if I take these 18 and extrapolate it out to 60, this is what the deferred maintenance is going to be. Typically, they do that, okay? So that's how they get the $250,000 number. Is that cool? Yes. Yep. Okay.